I was 7 months pregnant, standing in the middle of my mother-in-law's living room, when she handed me a document and told me to sign it before my husband got home. I remember staring at the paper without fully understanding what I was reading. My back ached. My feet were swollen inside my shoes. I had driven 40 minutes to her house that afternoon because she'd called, saying it was urgent, that she needed to talk to me about something that couldn't wait. I assumed it was about the baby shower, maybe a scheduling conflict. Maybe she wanted to change the venue. It was not about the baby shower. My name is Audrey. I'm 34 years old, and at the time this happened, I had been married to my husband for 5 years. We had built what I believed was a genuinely good life together. A house in Flagstaff, Arizona. 2 dogs. A vegetable garden in the backyard that we'd planted together the spring before. We weren't perfect. No couple is. But I trusted him completely. I trusted his family almost as much. That trust nearly destroyed everything. The document his mother handed me was a property agreement. A legal form, already filled out, that would transfer my name off the deed to our house. She had a pen in her other hand, held out like she was doing me a favor, like this was something I'd obviously want to do if I just thought about it clearly. "It's for protection," she told me. Her voice was calm, almost sweet. "With the baby coming, you want everything structured properly." I asked her what that meant. She explained. Very slowly, very patiently. The way someone explains something to a person they think is a little slow. That removing my name from the deed would actually benefit me, because it would reduce our joint tax liability and simplify the inheritance process for the baby. I was a paralegal. I had been working in family law for 6 years. I knew exactly what that document was. I told her I wasn't going to sign anything without my husband's knowledge and without having it reviewed by an attorney. She smiled at me, set the pen down on the coffee table and said, "Of course, I understand." Then she offered me a glass of water and asked if I wanted to see the nursery furniture she'd picked out. I drove home that afternoon, feeling like something had shifted under my feet. Like the ground had moved a little, and I wasn't sure it had stopped moving yet. I told myself it was probably nothing. She was controlling. Yes. She'd always been a little too involved in our finances, a little too quick with opinions about how we should spend money or structure our savings. But she loved her son. She loved the idea of the grandchild who was coming. I told myself this was just her being her. I did not tell my husband what had happened. Not that night. That was my first mistake. 3 weeks later, I came home from work early because I had a headache that wouldn't quit, and my OB had told me to rest more. My husband's car was in the driveway, which surprised me. He was supposed to be at work until 6. I let myself in through the side door and heard him on the phone in the kitchen. His voice was low and tight, the voice he used when he was stressed about something serious. I stood in the hallway with my keys still in my hand and listened without meaning to. He was talking to his mother. "I told you it wouldn't work," he was saying. "She's not going to just sign something like that. She works in law, Mom. She's not going to miss what that is." A pause. Then, "That's not the point. The point is, you should have talked to me first." Another pause, longer. "Because I'm not doing it that way." "I'm not." He didn't hear me come in. I waited until he ended the call, and then I walked into the kitchen and asked him what he was not doing. The look on his face told me everything I needed to know about how serious it was. He sat down at the kitchen table. I sat across from him, and for the next 2 hours, he told me things I had not known for the entire 5 years of our marriage. His mother had been quietly borrowing money from a joint account she shared with his father for over 3 years. Not small amounts. The total, by the time his father had discovered it and told my husband, was somewhere around $180,000. She had been funneling it into a separate account she'd opened without his father's knowledge, and she had been using portions of it to cover debts she'd accumulated privately. Credit cards, a personal loan, payments on a storage unit full of things no one knew she'd been collecting. My husband had found out 8 months ago. 8 months. I had been living with him through an entire pregnancy, waking up next to him every morning, and he had known this for 8 months and said nothing to me. He said he'd been trying to fix it quietly. He said he'd been working with an attorney to figure out how much of it could be recovered without going to the police, without destroying his parents' marriage, without putting his father through the humiliation of having his wife arrested. He said he didn't want me stressed during the pregnancy. He said a lot of things that night. What he did not say, what he couldn't explain in any way that made sense to me, was why he thought he could protect me by leaving me completely in the dark. I asked him about the document his mother had handed me. He closed his eyes. He said she had acted on her own, that she'd apparently decided that if my name was off the deed, it would be harder for anyone to come after the house if the situation ever escalated into litigation. She was trying to protect the asset, not for me, not for the baby, but from me, in case I found out and decided to leave, in case I became someone who might someday have a legal claim she wanted to limit. I sat there in our kitchen with my hands over my stomach, and I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I asked him if he still wanted to be married to me. He looked up. "What?" "I need to know," I said, "because if you can keep something this big from me for 8 months, I need to know if this marriage is what you actually want or if I'm just here." He reached across the table and took both of my hands in his. He said, "Yes." He said he was sorry. He said he had made the worst decision of his life, and he knew it. I didn't pull my hands away, but I also didn't feel better yet. The next morning, I called my own attorney. I want to be clear about what I was doing when I made that call. I was not preparing to file for divorce. I was not trying to punish him. I was doing the one thing I should have done the night his mother handed me that pen. I was protecting myself. Our attorney friend, who'd referred me, told me the same thing I already knew. Keep documentation of everything, say nothing outside the household until the situation with his parents was clearer, and make sure that any legal process that touched our property or finances had my full participation. My husband didn't argue. He actually seemed relieved that I was taking it seriously. That, more than the apology, was what started to bring me back. The following weeks were some of the hardest of my life, and that's saying something because I was also 31 weeks pregnant and running out of room to breathe. My husband and his father had agreed to bring the matter to a mediator. A private one, not the courts, at least not yet. The plan was to give his mother a chance to acknowledge what she had done and agree to a repayment structure before anyone involved law enforcement. I stayed out of the direct conversations with her. Partially because my attorney suggested it. Partially because I genuinely did not trust what I would say to her if we were in the same room. But she came to us. One Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks before my due date, the doorbell rang, and I opened it, and there she was. No warning, no call. She had a casserole dish in her hands and an expression on her face that I had never seen her wear before. Something between apology and defiance. Like she was sorry, but she also wasn't entirely sure she needed to be. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I stepped aside and let her in. My husband came out of the office when he heard her voice. His face went very still. "Mom, you should have called." "I know." She set the casserole on the kitchen counter without being invited to. "I needed to come. I needed to say this in person." We sat down in the living room, the three of us. My husband on the couch beside me, his mother in the chair across from us. She started talking. What came out over the next 40 minutes was not exactly a confession. It was more like a rearrangement of facts told in a way that minimized her role at every turn. She had borrowed the money because she'd been ashamed to tell his father about the credit card debt. The debt had started with her sister's medical bills. Her sister had been sick, really sick, 2 years before, and she hadn't wanted to burden anyone. So she'd put things on a card, then another card, and when she couldn't keep up with the payments, she'd moved money to cover them, just temporarily, intending to put it back. She said the word temporarily 4 times. At some point, and this was the part that made my breath catch. She looked directly at me and said that she had hoped that removing my name from the deed would give her more time. Time to fix things before it all became a legal matter that could affect the baby's future. I was trying to protect the family, she said. I looked at her for a long moment. You were trying to protect yourself, I said. She opened her mouth, closed it. Her eyes went to her son. He didn't rescue her. Audrey's right, he said quietly. That's what you were doing. The silence that followed was the kind that fills a room completely. She didn't argue. She looked down at her hands, and for the first time, she looked less like the woman who had handed me that pen, and more like someone who was genuinely tired of carrying something she should have put down a long time ago. She agreed that afternoon to sign a formal repayment agreement that my attorney had drawn up. She agreed to attend financial counseling. She agreed to tell his father the full truth, all of it, including the document she'd asked me to sign, by the end of the week. That last one was the condition I had added. Not my husband. Me. Because his father deserved to know. And because I wasn't going to let that particular secret stay buried, just because it was uncomfortable. His father called us 3 days later. He didn't say much. He was a quiet man by nature, and this kind of thing would take time to settle in him the way it takes time for water to settle after something heavy drops into it. But he thanked me. Specifically me. He said he was grateful someone in the family hadn't been willing to look the other way. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just told him we'd get through it. Our daughter was born 11 days later, in the early hours of a Thursday morning, in a hospital in Flagstaff, with my husband holding my hand and crying before I did. She was 7 pounds, 4 ounces, and she had his nose and my stubbornness. And the moment they put her on my chest, I felt something realign inside me that had been slightly off-center for months. Not fixed, not instantly, but realigning. The road after her birth was not smooth or simple. My husband and I started seeing a couples therapist, 6 weeks postpartum. Not because we were on the verge of ending things, but because we had agreed that if we were going to stay together, we were going to do it with both eyes open and with no more closed doors between us. Our therapist, a calm woman who said exactly what needed to be said without ever raising her voice, told us early on that the biggest damage in our situation wasn't the money or even the secret his mother had kept. It was the choice my husband had made to manage the situation without including me. You thought you were protecting her, she said to him one session. But what you actually communicated was that you didn't trust her to handle it. He sat with that for a while. I watched him sit with it. Then he nodded and said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I did." That moment, that plain, undefended acknowledgement, mattered more to me than almost anything else that happened in those months. His mother followed through on the repayment agreement, slowly but consistently. She and his father are still married, which surprised me more than it probably should have. His father is a steadier person than I had given him credit for, and she, it turns out, was carrying more shame than I had understood. That doesn't excuse what she did. It doesn't explain away the document she handed me or the calculation behind it, but it made her human in a way I'd stopped letting her be. I didn't forgive her all at once. I don't think forgiveness works like that, or at least it doesn't for me. It was more like, over time, I stopped spending energy on the anger. I redirected it toward things that mattered more. The baby, the marriage, the slow, unglamorous work of rebuilding something that had been shaken. She sees our daughter about once a month now. Supervised, in the sense that my husband is always present. Not because we issued some formal decree, but because that's just how it settled. She brings things, a little outfit, a stuffed animal, something she saw and thought the baby would like. She and I are polite to each other. We will probably never be close, but we are no longer enemies, and that's enough for me right now. What I think about, when I think back on all of it, is that document. That pen held out toward me across a coffee table. The certainty she must have felt in that moment, that I was just a young woman who wouldn't know what she was looking at. She didn't know who she was dealing with. And honestly, as much as that whole period cost me in sleep and stress and tears I cried in the car so my husband wouldn't see, I'm glad she underestimated me. Because finding out the way I did, Catching the corner of that secret and pulling until the whole thing unraveled meant that I never had to wonder later whether something was being hidden from me. It was all out. Every ugly piece of it. And from that rubble, my husband and I built something sturdier. People sometimes talk about betrayal like it's the end of a story. Like once the trust is broken, the only thing left to write is the ending. But that's not what happened to us. The betrayal was a beginning, in a way I never would have chosen, but can no longer imagine my life without. Because it forced us to be honest with each other, at a depth we'd never reached before. It forced me to stop assuming that love was the same thing as transparency. It forced him to stop thinking that protecting me meant making decisions without me. Our daughter is 14 months old now. She pulls herself up on the coffee table and looks very proud of herself, and her laugh sounds like something I never knew I'd been waiting to hear my whole life. The house is still in both our names. It always will be.